Right, we're at the Crown in Chardin. I'm here with the man, the legend, former player and manager of Aston Villa, Brian Little. Great to be with you, Brian.
Thanks, yeah, it's lovely. I like to be out and about. I mean, Chris and I, Chris Beebe, who's with me tonight, we do a few little bits and bobs together. We enjoy each other's company. We like talking to the fans. I think I'm from that era where, after a game, you used to go down the pub and have a drink with the fans. So it's just something that stayed with me all my life. I think obviously in my management days it was difficult to do, but as the game's evolved, it just doesn't happen these days. But I think, thankfully, people like myself and the lads who won the European Cup and all that era are used to doing this sort of thing, and it's just something that we enjoy, to be honest.
It's a very nostalgic time for Villa fans, isn't it? You mentioned the 40th anniversary of the European. I was at Villa Park the other day they honoured the lads, and it was emotional, wasn't it?
It was brilliant. I mean, it's taken a bit of time for something like that to happen, but now that it has happened, it was well worth the wait, I think. That particular weekend, the lads got together on the Friday night. I went out for dinner with them, with a couple of representatives from the club. They had their girlfriends and wives with them, and you just sense then, oh, this is a little bit different. We've not done this before. Hang on, why haven't we done this? And it is something that we should mark as often as we can. Some of the lads, we're all cracking on a little bit now. And I can genuinely say, I've been lucky, I've been in the game all my life really, but a lot of these lads who won the European Cup only have days like that to savour,
Yeah.
And it's a funny thing to say, but they every year would be very much in their diary. And every day of their life, they live with being the European Cup winner. I've been very fortunate, so much as every day of my life I've been in football.
Yeah.
And it sort of, it doesn't take the shine off anything like that, but it's just something that I know when I'm in amongst them lads that I've been privileged in a different way to them, and I can understand when they watch the game sometimes they get a bit frustrated. They, why? Because they've missed out on so much. But that particular day is probably the greatest day in the club's history.
Oh yeah. No doubt about it.
And for me, the way the club did it that weekend was outstanding, and I know all the lads loved every minute of it. So it was a great day. And I was pleased to be, a part of it in the background. I did the co-commentary on the game itself. So it brings back so many memories for me.
Yeah, the game itself was forgettable, but being there on that day, was
I mean, I have to watch it every now and again to realise and remember how the game actually went.
Sorry, Brian, do you mean in Rotterdam in '82?
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you meant Crystal Palace on the day of the.
No.
Sorry, that's my mistake. No, that's never forgettable. Sorry, no, of course. Question I wanted to ask you, which I look back on the last interview we did, and I wish I could have asked you. And you mentioned the lads from 81, 82. There's obviously a clear, in terms of how Villa fans see it, there's a defining line between the era of Little and Gray, With and Shaw. But there is footage of you on the bus in 81 when the team came back. What was your connection like? Because it had all come to an end for you just at the time when it was starting to all sort of crystallise what Ron had built. I mean,
I was in that period. I was still at the club. I mean, I actually worked in the club shop for a while. But the year they won the league, the day that they won the league. I was in Guernsey with the Guernsey Aston Villa supporters. So they were always still looking after me. I've always been looked after. I've always felt part of it. The best part for me is the lads who won the European Cup are all my best mates.
Yeah.
And very much sort of heroes of mine as well, So it's amazing how your mates can turn into sort of heroes of yours. And it might have been different had I been part of that particular team that day. I might have thought of them in a different way altogether. I don't know, but I obviously Alan Evans and I have been friends for years. We worked together years later in football. I went to the game. I went to the party afterwards. I partied with them, and probably for me, I'm not really a party animal, but I think I partied a little bit too heavy that night.
Your mate Pedro tells a funny story, doesn't he?
He tells loads of them. Yeah, he gets into the background of everywhere. He's he was in a privileged position. In those days, the press were very much part of everything that went on. Back in those days, you needed the press men to be your friends and things like that, and they travelled on the team bus odd times, slightly, perhaps a couple of years before that. They'd travel on the team bus. If they needed a lift, they get looked after. So there's a massive game-changing thing about football today. But I think that period that we had was a wonderful period, really. But the club never did anything other than look. I've been looked after almost for the 50-odd years. Not totally by Aston Villa, but by football. But Villa have made a massive part of my life.
So it was a no-brainer in November of '94 when Mr. Ellis called you. It's a no-brainer, yes. When you look back, but I had reservations. I was manager of Leicester City, and I'd had 3 great years with Leicester City. B, I was looked after, and they thought a lot of me. C, I was worried to a point of hang on a sec, I don't ever remember being booed as a football player. I played for Aston Villa, and the from 17 to 26, anytime I played, I was never. I don't think I can't ever remember anyone shouting at me, "That was useless little," or anything like that. Yeah. To go into management, to go back there, and at the time they were 4th or bottom in the Premier League. The one thing was, is it the right time to go? The other thing was, as John Gregory always said to me, and he said at that time so many times to me, if you don't go now, you might not ever get the chance again. So, there were some reservations, I have to say. I had to think about, hang on, if I go manager Aston Villa, the 4th off the bottom in the Premier League, if they get relegated, I could actually change the perception of the fans' view of me in many respects. But I think once John and I sat down and we talked, and John said, look, if you don't do it now, it might not ever come again. I think that was the defining sentence. Yeah. That was the one that made me think, look, hang on a sec, I've got to do it. Didn't we play Leicester early on after the move?
The thing is, obviously, there was a lot of argy-bargy going on. Leicester didn't want me to go, obviously. And it took a lot of persuasion. And I actually said to them in the end, I said, look lads, to the chairman and other people like that, if you don't let me go, I'm just going to pack in football. Yeah. It means that much to me. I'll never manage Aston Villa. I'll never manage anybody again. Now those words were switched around to be, yes, I'm not going to go to Aston Villa. But I meant I would have actually I would have just broken my I would have just finished my career there and then. Mm-hmm. But the words got twisted as they do sometimes, and it made me look a little bit awful. And because of that, the Leicester fans were holding up placards with Judas and all sorts of things. And I think, in all honesty, that was the first day in my entire career that I'd been booed and jeered by fans. I mean, I'd been a youth coach for many years, so you're not getting that. Then I'd gone to Darlington, where I won 2 championships. Then I went to Leicester, who I'd taken to 3 playoff finals 3 years in a row. And now all of a sudden, I'm a real bad boy. And it took me a little while to get over that, because that was the first day ever. I mean, I'd probably had a few things shouted at me at Leicester on occasions when we were losing a game, but nothing as passionate as that particular day going back to Leicester. I remember waking up on the morning of that, and I was on the front page of the Sun newspaper. Judas, and I'm like, what? Because a friend of mine, a reporter friend, rang me and said, "Have you seen the Sun?" I went, "No." He said, "You better go out and buy it." And I went, it was a really strange period for me. And going back to Leicester and being absolutely hammered by the fans who had taken to three years in the row to the playoff final. It took a long time for that to mend as well, I mean, I go back to Leicester now and I still get lots of people saying, "Brian, we're so pleased with what you did. You were the platform for us to be where we are today." That's really nice. Martin O'Neill obviously carried on a great job after me. But to go to 3 playoff finals 3 years in a row is an unbelievable experience and job. I mean, John Allen and myself worked our socks off with a great group of players. So that's had a lasting effect. on me as well.
Did it help having Mr. Ellis solidly in your court, being like that father figure in the game for you?
For whatever reason, Mr. Ellis and I always got on well. From the day I walked into Villa Park, from the day he signed me, I don't know what. I mean, I don't know what it was. Lots of stories about him signing me and my brother, and Doug only signing Alan because my mum said, well, Brian won't come unless Alan comes, sort of thing. And yeah, my brother played for the first team. People shouldn't forget that. So he was a good player, my brother was. But obviously my mum wanted Alan with me if possible. But Doug always had this sort of real sort of friendship towards me, if that's the right word. I mean, I remember the first day I walked into Villa Park, he stopped his Rolls Royce as I was walking into the driveway. I was with a lad called Roy Stark, who was, I was in digs with. And he said, hello, Brian. And then he said to Roy, and what's your name, young man? So, here I am with another apprentice. And he knew me, recognised me straight away. But I had to say to me, oh, and what's your name, Roy? Because Roy ended up being the captain of the youth team. So there was always a connection there.
But he was relatively new to the game himself at that time, wasn't he? Having come in.
But like I'm saying, but the strangeness was for me that, from the day he met me, he always seemed to know who I was, whereas he must have known Roy Stark, or he must have seen the list of names, or whatever, or however. We'd signed 3 Scottish schoolboy internationals that year. Gordon Knowles, and Jimmy Brown, Billy Kellick. They were all Scottish internationals. But for whatever reason, he knew me and he knew my name. And we've always had a good relationship. Even when I left, we had a good relationship. People often said, I bet you left because Doug's kicked you out, sort of thing. He never sacked me.
No.
I just had 3 years of Doug as a chairman.
Yeah.
And 3 years of Mr. Ellis as a chairman was hard work. And he had this reputation of, after 3 years, if the manager was still there, generally speaking, the manager left. If after 1 year the manager left, it was because he sacked them. So, and so that was his thing.
I'm going to ask you a question, and I don't want you to be possibly offended by it, but I've always been keen to know. There's 2 players that stand out during your time at Villa who were signed, who I always got the feeling that if it had been up to you, you wouldn't have brought them in. And one of them being Sasa Churchich in the second, and the other obviously Stan Collymore.
Yeah, no, well, I can answer that very sort of straight and forward. Any player that was signed at Villa Park was signed by me. Stan Collymore, I think Stan and I, if I'd have stayed, I think Stan would have been a hit at Villa Park.
Right, that's interesting.
Because I just think Stan and John's a completely different character to me. John was very feisty when he became a manager. Stan and I have a great relationship even to this day. Sasha, different story. Sasha was hard work. I mean, good player, massive talent. I think it was the first time in Sasha's life he had any money in his back pocket, sort of thing, and he just sort of, for me, lost the plot a little bit. He was into, going out and loved the lifestyle of a top class player. I felt he was a great talent.
He stood out in that Bolton team.
He did. I knew at the time that I owed it to Tommy Johnson, who was mostly a sub for me, but he was probably my favourite player ever. I owed it to Tommy to allow him to play first team football somewhere. He'd had 2 years as a sub virtually. I was looking for someone else who could play in that number 10 role that they talk about now. At the time we often played with 2 strikers and 1 behind, which Tommy often had. But I only went to that particular system if my 5-3-2 wasn't working. Churchich was an ideal sort of comparison to Tommy Johnson for me. Little differences, obviously, but he was a better dribbler. But it just didn't work, and Sasha was just hard work from the day he came in. And it was probably because for the first time in his life he had a few pennies in his pocket and he enjoyed it. And he was a lovely lad, but he was a little bit unreliable as well. He often was out when he shouldn't have been out. But I genuinely say both of them were signed 100% by me. I was brought up in the management era where the management was everything. Chief scout, answered all the press questions. You did sorted the training out, did this, did that, did everything. So no, I've never I've never signed anybody without me 100% wanting to sign.
And they were two really strong characters in Vic Rowe and Ron Saunders as well.
Yeah, they were. They were. I mean, Saunders was a great mentor for me in many ways. I didn't realise it when I was a player.
Yeah.
When I became a manager, I realised how good Ron Saunders was of building a team. And I tried to replicate Ron Saunders' teams wherever I went.
I always got that feeling, not necessarily with the formation and the stuff, but the professionalism.
No, yeah, and the fact that it wasn't all about all of them being brilliant players. They all had brilliant attributes.
Yeah.
And in those days, and I still think to a degree today, although the best teams in the world and the best teams in the Premier League now have like 11 international players, I still think there are some teams, even in the Premier League, that build. If you're not that biggest team in the world and you can't build the best player team, you go out there and you build a team of different types of character.
Yeah.
All with their strengths being very important to your team.
Yeah.
So I look back at people like Frank Carradus, Des Bremner, Ian Taylor. I put him into their sort of categories. I look at Gordon Cowans, and I think of Alex Cropley, and then I think of Mark Draper, Dennis Mortimer, your leader. I think of Andy Townsend in there. So I tried to replicate the sort of players Saunders had, and he always had two strikers, sometimes three in the era when he had John Dee and myself and Andy. He always had two strikers who could cause opposition problems. Peter Withen and Gary Shaw, Andy Gray and myself. And I just tried to replicate his team everywhere I went, even when I was at Darlington. Although they weren't as good as the type of players I'm talking about, they were still replicated in a Darlington team. So Saunders had a massive influence on me. The only difference between Ron and I was our personalities were a million miles apart. He was in an era where the boss was the boss and the boss wouldn't give anybody anything, wouldn't give anybody any time, was pretty harsh to players. But that's how it was in those days.
Yeah.
I was very much I wouldn't do anything or ask anybody to do anything I wouldn't do myself. Mm-hmm. So that was our major difference. But he's a massive influence on me, Ron. And will always have stayed that way with me. So
I've just got one more football question because we're short on time before the event starts here. We're in August now, it's the start of the season, everybody gets sort of excited, people do their predictions, and obviously social media plays a big part in heaping the pressure on. The summer of 95, what was the expectation?
I think what I had done and what I had established was that Ron had left a great team, but the great team were a little bit tired of each other, and there were a lot of players there who were absolutely excellent players. Dean Saunders. How do you replace Dean Saunders? The reason I replaced Dean Saunders with Dwight York, only because I knew if I'd kept Dean would always have been the number one striker. He's that sort of a personality. Yeah. Dwight needed to be given that role. So I'd made this decision and I'd had his agent on a couple of times and Dalian's agent too. They could both go to Fenerbahce and Galatasaray. People like Kevin Richardson, captain and things like that in the team. Ray Houghton, some blooming good players. But I needed to freshen it all up. And I always had a plan that if I ever got to the Premier League, that sort of thing, I was going to look at good young international footballers, perhaps not England internationals, but under 23 internationals who played good amount of games. So the Drapers, the Gary Charles, the Alan Wrights, all of these lads came to mind, and Tommy Johnsons, and all of these lads who played at a standard. And if I could mix them in with Gareth Southgate, for example, another one there, if I could mix them in with Paul McGrath, Andy Townsend, and Mark Bosnich, who was a great goalkeeper, keep the spine of the team, but bring some younger players in who were hungry, who had real talent. It obviously worked better than I ever thought.
Yeah.
It was incredible. The way we started with a Man United game at the start of the season. And the momentum just built along, and the 95-96 season was all about momentum. all about team spirit. We had a wonderful group of players who got on, and that was the main thing. You know, when you have to change your team, it makes a difference. And I mentioned Tommy Johnson earlier. Moving Tommy and bringing Sasha in didn't work. But I had to. Tommy used to knock on my door all the time, saying, "Look, I've got to play, Gaffer," you know. And he'd never caused me any trouble or anything like that. But I remember I got a call after midnight from Celtic, and the minute I started speaking to the manager, I knew I had to let Tommy know about this one. So I didn't want to break the team up, but you have to sometimes, and then rebuilding is and I realised then how key that is as well. But I genuinely think in the when we talk about Stan, I think if I'd stayed, Stan and I had a wonderful relationship. We still speak to each other.
So it was
today.
never Stan that finished you off?
No, absolutely not. No. I really just, there was too many things going on in my life. You know, I mean, I got to the point where, you know, my home life wasn't good. I worked too hard. I'd ruined that sort of thing. And I'm really good at looking after other people's problems, but I'm not very good at looking after my own.
Was there,
you know,
was there like a 5-0 or a 5-1 at Blackburn?
Yeah,
or
we had a
something
bad spell. I remember. I mean, like I've said, you know, we were having a great European campaign.
Yeah.
But the home campaign, there were two little things that or perhaps even one that John Gregory. When I'd signed Stan, I had Sasha, I had Milosevic and Jo, and I tried to play the three of them too many times because I got three good players. Now that, if I look back now, that's a very easy.
You'd have 5 subs now.
It's an easy thing but it's an easy thing to deal with. But like I say, I'd had 10 years of management and I was tired. I had problems in my home life. All John Gregory did when he came in was left one of them three out and put Lee Hendry in the team.
Yeah.
There was one.
Just a fresh pair of eyes to look at it.
But a fresh pair of eyes, and that really was something that I couldn't really pick up upon at the time, and that's ludicrous, really. But then that really tells me, you know, where I was at in my life, and that I was a bit mixed up. But you know, I'm pleased for John, and I'm pleased he fixed it. And I didn't want to mess the club up anymore. I felt that I was beginning to get a little bit frustrated and run out of ideas, and I needed a breather. I mean, in fairness to Doug Ellis, Doug said to me, "Brian, I don't want you to go. Just come and sit upstairs with me and we'll bring John back."
Yeah.
And I went, "I can't do that to John, because if I'm sitting looking over above John, I didn't feel that was fair on him."
Yeah.
That's just the way I was in the do. So it was the end of a great period, a sad end, but at the same time I never left. I left the team in the quarter-final of the UEFA Cup. That was John's second game.
Hint of 82 about it, really, isn't there? I mean,
I often wonder, because, you know, I was doing so well in the European campaign. I often wonder if I'd stayed, whether I actually would have won the because John was unlucky against Madrid, wasn't he? In fact, John got mentioned for jobs out there loads of times after that in his life. So
I remember he dedicated a win to you on TV, didn't he, in an interview afterwards? I think it was his first one.
In Liverpool, his first game.
Final one, and I might challenge you on your answer. But what was the best 90-minute performance from your Villa team in your time as manager?
Oh wow, I don't know.
Can I suggest one?
Go on.
Middlesbrough, New Year's Day '96.
Yes, Alan Wright's goal.
Alan Wright, and that 20-pass move that Tommy Johnson finished off.
I remember going up there, and I can remember training a little a non-league football club, and I remember the day before the game thinking, "Oh, heck, they're on fire here." I remember that, and we absolutely
2 postponements lead up to it, I think, over Christmas.
I just remember when we'd gone up there, and it was an awkward day, and I remember as a young lad going up to Middlesbrough and on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, and playing against Stuart Bowman, Tony McAndrew, and thinking, "Oh my God, look who we're playing up here." But I remember. As you give that, what I would say is about that performance. That performance sticks in my mind as being what a brilliant performance it was, because we won the match. We absolutely bladdered them.
All the talk was Juninho, wasn't it?
We were outstanding. So that, a good game. But I haven't really got a favourite. I've got a lot of favourites. There are lots of games I liked. Even hanging on in the semi-final with Arsenal.
From 2-0. From 2-0.
Especially with Bruce Rioch being like one of my major mentors in my life. So there's lots of games. I think that year I had lots of favourite games. We beaten Wimbledon 7 and all that sort of stuff. It was really Man United first game of the season was a terrific boost for us all. I've never really sat down. People are more asking me about what's my favourite game as a player, and it's always Liverpool when we beat them 5. You know, so that's real. But I've never really spent a lot of time thinking about that. But yeah, I would say the Middlesbrough game, I concur that it was an outstanding performance on the night.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we're here at the Crowley Shard End. Brian Little, my Aston Villa, that you've been working on with your good mate Pedro White. You're going to sign some copies, do a Q&A. I mean, like you said at the start, it's good to be out on the road and meeting the fans.
I always like going out. I always have done. I mean, it sort of brings me back to life. I mean, there's you just love having a laugh and a joke, and some of the stories we can tell from the 70s and 80s. Like all the older people here love it, but the younger ones go, "What? You can't believe you did that!" And I can't believe, and you just ordinary everyday. We just did the same things. I was brought up with going out for a couple of pints with the lads was seen as team bonding and team spirit, and being in amongst the fans was team bonding and team spirit. And to this day. It worked, but the modern thing is like it's on a different scale to it now. The lads they're physically better, mentally better in many ways. I think the game's evolved, and people ask me about the modern game. I say I love it, But obviously I'm pleased that I'd never change where I played and how I played. It was something that will just stay with me forever now.
Well, they say you should never meet your heroes. I think that's a complete myth. And I appreciate it very much. Brian Little, thanks very much for joining us.
Pleasure, no problems. Thank you.